When should you hire and who should you hire first? So there's lots of people giving lots of advice on this. I have a somewhat controversial opinion on this that I am going to share with you today. So let's start off by just mentioning, obviously, there's stages in your business. When you're just getting started, that early stage, you have more time than money, right? Then later on, you get more money than time. So early stage, you want help, but you generally cannot afford it. During this stage, here is my attitude about this. I think that during those very early stages, you need to do as many things as are absolutely possible yourself. Now, but basically everything here I'm saying assumes you have not gotten outside funding and that you don't have like a big account full of money that you can spend on this. So if you're a normal person starting a normal bootstrap business, not a lot of money, and the little amount of money you've got, you need to stretch as far as you can so you don't have to go back and get a job. So this is the kind of person that I'm talking about. If you're in this, let me continue on. So basically, when you are in this stage and you're doing as many things as possible yourself, you need to be figuring out how to do a bunch of things that you wouldn't generally consider to be your strength. So you may have to do some technical, do some bookkeeping, do some copywriting, do some selling, do some marketing, things that you may not feel prepared for, adequate for. And so you've got to go figure out how to do them and do them even if, hey, you know, some of those things are things that you're not really good at, that you don't like doing, sometimes that you hate doing. And that you feel like if anyone else in the world did it, they'd probably do better than me. Well, you know what? Right now, you can't afford to have somebody else to do that. So the other day, I was watching something that said every entrepreneur should go out and hire a cook because you spend all these hours cooking and cleaning up every day. And it's like, that makes all the sense in the world once you've got the income to be able to do that. But if you've got $4,000 in a bank account and that's all you've got, before you have to go back and get a job, the last thing I would do is hire a cook or somebody to mow my lawn, right? You spend that on the things you got to do to be able to succeed. And I'm sorry, this is a fact of life, these things that I'm sharing with you. You can spend that money, go hire somebody to do those, a bookkeeper because you hate bookkeeping, or somebody technical because you hate technical, but as soon as you do, you are cutting into your reserves. You're reducing the amount of time that you've got to have before you've got to have revenue, so that you don't have to go back and get a job. Okay. So let me give you an example of this. Advertising. So I talk to people all the time. Says, yeah, I know I need to do advertising and I need to hire somebody to do it because it just sounds so hard. And I agree entirely that advertising is essential to your initial growth. Right out here up front, at first, I mean, it's really tough to grow quickly without advertising. But the problem is this: you cannot afford the management fees that anybody who's any good is going to charge you. So anybody who's any good is going to charge you at least $3,000 to $5,000 a month just to look into your account and run the advertising for you. Most people, they're saying, I could probably afford to spend $500 on advertising, much less $3,000 to $5,000 on administration of that advertising, plus the amount you have to actually pay in advertising costs. You simply cannot afford to hire an agency or hire an expert in the very early stages of your business. If you're bootstrapping, don't have a large chunk of cash sitting out there. And so you've got to figure out how to do it yourself. Now, you probably won't be as efficient or as effective as somebody who's an expert who does this every single day. But guess what? You can't afford them. So you'll learn how to do it. So there's a key bootstrapping principle. I've lived in a bootstrapping environment my entire life, other than 10 years I spent working for corporate America. I've learned a lot about bootstrapping. The key is you've got to preserve cash. Cash becomes king during this particular time. And anything you can do to hold back cash so that you've got that in your reserves, and it helps, even if that means that you're doing things that you don't like doing. I hate bookkeeping. I ran my bookkeeping for a number of years. The first outsourcer I hired was a bookkeeper. And you may not be great at those things. There are people who can do them better than you. So the key here is to focus your bootstrapped business on getting on income as early as possible. You don't have the ability to go spend 6 months figuring out what you want to do when you grow up, and then another 6 months putting together what it is that you're going to sell. You need to get to income as quickly as possible. And once you get to income, then you can start shifting tasks onto other people by hiring and or outsourcing. And those people can then be more skilled in those areas. And so your ads will perform better, your programming will perform better, your graphic design will look better, your copywriting will be better copywritten. All those kinds of things tend to happen when you are able to bring in the outside help. But in the meantime, you got to go do what it takes to get at least adequately good at what it is that needs to be done for you to do that. So you need to learn how to create a landing page. It's not hard. Literally, kids in 4th grade are learning how to do that in schools that are smart enough to go beyond just teaching programming and actually teach them real skills. Hey, 4th graders can do it. You can certainly do it. And then when you start bringing in your first hires, my suggestion is that you don't do what I did. When I said I hired a bookkeeper as one of my first hires, I would not do that. The lesson I've learned is that I want to bring in other people who also have multifunctional capabilities. In other words, so when I am doing everything in my business and now I bring in my first hire, I don't want to hire someone who's just an expert in advertising. I want to bring in a person who has multiple different capabilities so they can take multiple different capabilities off my shoulders. And the two of us, each one of us, are doing a bunch of different things. And so that first person is probably not going to be a specialist. And that person needs to have the ability to learn and do new things, even things that they have never thought of in the past. They may have to write some copy or do some design or do some tech stuff. Now, I believe that you should follow the normative advice out there. So there are many, many people who say, hire as soon as you can. And I totally agree with that. As soon as you can, but not too early. So you generally are not hiring people unless you got a chunk of money or outside funding before you've got revenues coming into your business. Ideally, not before you become profitable. Now, the profitable can be $10 a month profitable, but then if you're only making $10, you can't afford to pay them. So maybe if you're making $1,000 and you're bringing somebody who you're paying $1,000, now it works. Can you see what I'm saying? If you bring in somebody who's eating into all of your money, they're draining cash. You want people to contribute to cash, not draining cash. Now, this does bring up one other issue, is what about outsourcing? So there are certain things that you can and should outsource. So for example, let's say you've got something and and you could outsource to a programmer to do this thing that maybe you could pay them $1,000, $2,000. And at the end of that, they could have something that could save you or your other person 20 hours a month. That is absolutely worth it to do, to have something that saves time and or brings in direct revenue. So if you do an outsourcing deal, it needs to, number one, be a screaming deal. And number two, ideally, it leads directly to income. So I wouldn't just outsource. So the example I gave of saving you 20 hours, before that, if you've got something that they can do that directly brings in income, like, for example, you have an outsourcer create a program that you can sell. You have an outsourcer create a tool that you can sell. You have an outsourcer, in other words, creating something that you can directly sell. Now you've got a source of revenue, not a source of cash drain. I hope all this makes sense. It's a controversial, it's a more conservative, I understand, way of looking at it. But as I said, I've grown up my entire life bootstrapping, and I understand how important it is to preserve cash. And very frankly, the advice of just hire somebody, you'll be so much more productive. Well, that's true. But if you got $4,000 in the bank and you hire somebody for $1,000 a month, you got 4 months. That's it. And that assumes you have no other costs anywhere else in your business, which will never be true. Okay? Be conservative. Do things yourself. And then hire once you got the revenue to justify it. And ideally, hire people who create revenue, not just cost. What's your thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments. This is Don Crowther saying, just go do this stuff.